The market was alive with noise, yet it was not the sound of joy. It was the sound of greed. Creatures from 100 different worlds stood in the shadows, their eyes glowing, their voices whispering. It was the night of the auction, the night when lives were sold. At the center of the platform stood a girl chained at her wrists and ankles. Her skin was pale silver, her eyes deep violet, glowing softly even in the dark. Her hair was tangled, her clothes torn, her body trembling with fear. She was young, no more than 20 cycles, but her spirit already carried the weight of suffering. The announcer, a tall alien with skin like cracked stone, raised his voice. Lot number 47, a slave girl from the fallen world of Zera. Strong blood, rare beauty, good for work, or other pleasures. The crowd laughed. Some whistled. Others spat at the floor. For them, she was nothing but property, a tool, a toy. The girl kept her head low. She had been through this before. Each time she had prayed for death, but death never came. She had learned one truth. In chains, hope was dangerous. Start the bidding at 100 credits, the announcer shouted. Silence. The crowd did not move. Some smirked, others shook their heads. She's weak. She's worthless. Not even good enough for labor. The announcer frowned. He lowered the price. 50 credits. Again, no hands were raised. The girl's heart sank. She wanted to cry, but she had no tears left. To be unwanted was almost worse than being sold. 20 credits, the announcer barked. His voice cracked with anger. The crowd laughed. 20? I wouldn't pay 10 for her. She's already broken. And then, from the back of the market, a quiet voice spoke. 10. The crowd turned. It was a human. He stood tall, wrapped in a long coat, his face hidden in the shadow of his hood. His eyes, dark and steady, looked not at the sea, proud, but at the girl. His voice was calm, steady, like he knew exactly what he wanted. The crowd exploded with laughter. 10 credits for that trash? Humans, always collecting garbage. Maybe he wants a pet. The announcer sneered but slammed his staff on the ground. Sold. To the human. For 10 credits. The girl's knees shook. 10 credits. That was less than the price of a broken tool, less than the cost of a meal. She had been sold like trash. Her chest burned with shame. The chains were unlocked, but they were not removed. The guard shoved her forward, forcing her to walk to her new master. She lifted her head, just enough to see his face under the hood. He was not old, not cruel-looking. His eyes were tired, but there was no hunger in them, no lust, no cruelty. That confused her. Every buyer before had stared at her like she was meat. This one only looked calm. Still, she braced herself. She knew what would come next. Pain. That was always the way. The human placed a hand on her shoulder, but not roughly. His grip was gentle. He guided her out of the auction hall, ignoring the jeers and mocking voices. Outside, the night was cold. The stars burned above, sharp and bright. Ships hummed as they lifted into the sky. The girl felt the weight of her chains and waited for the first strike, the first order, the first cruelty, but none came. The human walked in silence. He did not drag her. He did not shout at her. He simply walked, as if he were carrying a burden only he understood. Her mind raced. Why buy me? Why for so little? What does he want? Fear grew inside her. The unknown was sometimes worse than pain. At least with pain, she knew what to expect. This silence was a mystery, and mysteries were dangerous. They reached the edge of the market, where an old starship rested, its surface scarred with burns and cracks. The human opened the ramp and motioned for her to enter. The girl hesitated. If she stepped inside, there would be no escape. She would belong to him completely. Her chains rattled as she shook with fear. The human looked at her, his eyes steady. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then he spoke, his voice quiet, almost kind. You are safe now. The words cut through her like a blade. Safe. She had never been safe. Not since her world burned. Not since the soldiers dragged her away. Not since the chains closed around her wrists. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to step inside. But in her heart, one thought echoed louder than all others. Safe? No. This is only the beginning. And beginnings always hurt. As the ramp closed behind her, the girl's breath trembled. She did not know if she had just walked into freedom or into another kind of cage. The ship was quiet, too quiet for her comfort. The girl sat on the cold floor, her chains clinking whenever she moved. She kept her eyes on the human, watching him carefully, waiting for the moment he would reveal his true nature. She had seen it before, kind faces that turned cruel, soft words that became commands. She knew humans could be just as vicious as any alien species. The man moved about the ship without looking at her. He placed the controls in order, checked the fuel lines, and typed in a course. His movements were calm, steady, almost ordinary. This unsettled her more than anger ever could. Finally, he turned. His hood was gone now, and she saw his face clearly for the first time. His jaw was sharp, his skin rough from old scars, his eyes dark but not cruel. He did not look at her the way buyers usually did. He did not see her as weak or broken. Instead, he looked at her like someone looks at a puzzle they cannot solve. "Eat," he said, placing a small pack of food in front of her. The girl froze. Food. Actual food. Not scraps, not leftovers. She narrowed her eyes. "Why give me this? What trick is this?" She shook her head and pushed it away. "No." The man sighed, not in anger, but in something that sounded like patience. He sat down across from her, unwrapping another pack for himself. Slowly, he ate in silence. The smell of the food filled the small cabin, making her stomach twist. She was hungry, terribly hungry, but hunger was safer than trust. He said nothing more. He let her watch him eat as if to prove it was safe, but her fear was stronger than her hunger. When he finished, he leaned back and studied her. "You think I will hurt you?" he said quietly. Her eyes widened, but she gave no answer. "I will not." She wanted to laugh, she wanted to spit at him. Those words were lies she had heard before, but the way he said them, calm, almost tired, made her hesitate. Still, she pulled her knees to her chest and stayed silent. The ship rose into the stars, leaving the slave market behind. The girl stared at the window, watching the world shrink into a dot of light. She remembered the cheers of the crowd, the way they laughed when she was sold for 10 credits. 10 credits, less than the price of a broken machine. Her throat burned with shame. The human worked quietly, adjusting the controls. He did not chain her to the wall, did not shout at her to obey. He treated her almost as if she were not there. That was strange, too strange. Hours passed. She tried to stay awake, but exhaustion pulled at her. Slowly, her head dropped, and for the first time in days, she slept. When she woke, the ship was dark, except for the faint glow of the stars outside. The human was still awake, sitting by the control panel. She could hear him whispering softly, as if speaking to himself. His voice was heavy, full of sorrow. "I couldn't save her. I couldn't save them all. But maybe I can save one." The girl's breath caught. Who was he talking about? Who had he failed to save? She shifted slightly and the chains rattled. His head turned and his eyes met hers. For a Mois meant silence filled the ship. He stood, walked over and crouched in front of her. His hand reached toward her chains, but she pulled back instantly, heart racing. "I'm not here to break you," he said softly. "I'm here to free you." She stared at him, her mind spinning. Free. No master had ever spoken those words. No buyer had ever meant them. "Why?" she whispered, her voice hoarse from silence. The human looked at her for a long time. His eyes held a sadness deeper than any cruelty. Finally, he said, "Because I failed once. I will not fail again." She wanted to ask more, but his voice ended the conversation. He stood and returned to his seat, leaving her in confusion. Her heart pounded. She had prepared herself for pain, for slavery, for the worst. But this was different, and the unknown was terrifying. Was he truly a savior? Or was this another game, another cruel trick to break her spirit? The stars outside seemed to whisper no answer. The only sound was the hum of the ship carrying them farther from the market and deeper into the unknown. She looked at him once more, the man who had bought her for the price of scraps, the man who claimed he wanted nothing from her but freedom. Her hands tightened around her chains. If he lies, I will know. If he tells the truth, then maybe, for the first time, I am not just a slave. The thought frightened her more than the chains ever had, because hope was a dangerous thing. The girl sat in the corner of the ship, her knees pulled close to her chest. The chains rattled whenever she shifted, sharp reminders of the life she had lived for too long. Across the room, the human worked silently, his back to her. He adjusted wires, tightened bolts, and checked screens. His movements were steady, controlled, as though the ship was the only thing that mattered. That silence made her uneasy. Masters usually spoke, commands, insults, threats, but this one said little. His quietness was not cruel, but it was unsettling. In her mind, silence meant danger. Silence was often the moment before the pain began. Her eyes moved to the pack of food still lying near her. Hours had passed since he placed it there, untouched. Hunger clawed at her stomach, twisting and burning. Still, she refused. If I eat it, maybe he will laugh. Maybe it is poisoned. Maybe it is a test. She had learned long ago that kindness often carried sharp teeth. The human glanced over his shoulder, his eyes meeting hers for only a second. Then he looked away again, as if giving her space. That confused her even more. Finally, he spoke. His voice was calm, almost too calm. You should eat. Hunger makes you weak. She shook her head quickly, tightening her grip on her knees. No. The man did not argue. He did not order. He simply turned back to his work. Your choice, he said softly. His lack of anger unsettled her. Most buyers would have struck her for refusing. Most would have forced her to obey. Why didn't he? The ship hummed as it glided through the stars. The girl stared at the food again. She tried to resist, but her body betrayed her. Her stomach growled loudly, echoing in the small cabin. The human didn't laugh. He didn't mock her. Instead, he opened another pack for himself, slowly eating so she could see, bite by bite, calm and steady. Her lips trembled. She could not hold back anymore. With shaking hands, she reached for the food. Her eyes darted to him, ready for mockery, ready for punishment, but he only gave a small nod as if to say, it's all right. The taste of the food almost broke her. It was warm, real, not the scraps she was used to. She ate quickly, almost desperately, afraid it might be taken away. But it wasn't. When she finished, she lowered her head, ashamed of her weakness. Why? She whispered. The human paused before answering. Because you need it. Simple words. Too simple. And yet they struck her harder than any blow. Her mind screamed not to belly, dive him, not to fall into the trap, but her heart wanted to. That night, she could not sleep. She lay awake, chains cold against her skin, listening to the quiet hum of the ship. Then she heard it again. His voice, soft, speaking to no one. I couldn't save her, but maybe I can save this one. Her breath caught. Her? Who was he talking about? Who had he lost? The pain in his voice was real, not the false sorrow of a master, not the cruel humor of an owner. This was different. For the first time, she wondered if his chains were invisible ones. The next day, she dared to speak more. What do you want from me? The man looked at her, surprised by the question. He leaned against the wall, arms folded. Nothing, he said simply. She frowned. Nothing? Everyone wants something. Not me. Then why buy me? His eyes darkened, filled with a sadness she could not name. Because once, I watched someone suffer in chains. I did nothing. I will not make that mistake again. Her chest tightened. She wanted to ask more, but fear held her tongue. Still, something inside her shifted. That night, she noticed he left the keys to her chains on the table. He did not hide them, did not guard them. He trusted she would not run. She stared at them for hours. Freedom was right there, within reach. But where would she go? She had no world, no home, no one waiting. Her fingers twitched, but she did not take them. Instead, she lay down and closed her eyes, though sleep did not come easily. For the first time in years, the cage she feared most was not the chains on her body. It was the strange possibility that maybe, just maybe, she was no longer a slave. But hope was dangerous, and she was not ready to believe. Not yet. As the stars drifted past, she whispered to herself, kindness is always a lie. It has to be. And yet, deep inside, a tiny spark whispered something else. What if this time, it isn't? The girl sat on the floor of the ship, her chains heavy, but her thoughts even heavier. For 2 days, she had watched the human. He never raised his hand against her. He never shouted. He spoke little, but when he did, his words were steady, calm, and strange. Still, she could not trust him. Trust was a dangerous thing. That evening, the hum of the ship was softer, almost like a lullaby. The man was fixing a panel near the cockpit when she finally gathered courage to ask, "Why did you buy me?" Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the silence like a blade. The human froze for a moment, his hands stilled on the tools. Slowly, he looked at her. His dark eyes carried a weight she could not measure. "I told you," he said softly. "I want nothing from you." "That is not an answer," she whispered. For a long time, he did not reply. Then he put the tools aside and sat down across from her. His posture was not of a master, but of someone tired. "You want to know why?" His voice was rough, almost reluctant. She nodded, though fear twisted in her chest. The man leaned forward, his gaze distant, as if looking back through time. Once, he began, there was someone I cared for, someone I was supposed to protect. Her heart tightened. His tone was not cold, it was broken. She was young, he continued. She was full of light, and I thought I could keep her safe, but I was wrong. He drew a deep breath, his jaw tightening. They came one night. Slavers. I fought, but there were too many. They took her, and I... His words caught in his throat. For a moment, his mask of calm cracked, and sorrow bled through. I survived. She didn't. The girl's eyes widened. Her chains rattled as she shifted, staring at him in silence. The man looked down at his hands, scarred and rough. Every night, I hear her voice. Every day, I see her face. I had one chance to save her, and I failed, and now... His eyes lifted, meeting the girl's. Now I cannot undo the past, but maybe, if I save one, maybe I can forgive myself. The girl's chest ached. She wanted to speak, but words would not come. Her mind screamed to be careful. Do not believe him. Do not fall into his trap. But her heart whispered something else. Still, she asked, her voice trembling. So, I am only your replacement? The human shook his head firmly. No, you are yourself. You are alive, and that is enough reason. His words echoed in the small cabin, heavy and unfamiliar. She had been sold as property, mocked as worthless, treated as less than an object, and yet here he was telling her she mattered, simply because she existed. It was too much. Her eyes burned, but she forced the tears back. She could not cry, not in front of him, not for him. The silence stretched. Finally, the man stood, as if the weight of his story was too heavy to linger. Rest, he said quietly. Tomorrow will not be easy. Tomorrow, the word carried warning. That night, the girl lay awake, her mind racing. She thought of his story, of the sister or lover or friend he had lost. Was that pain real or just another trick? Her heart wanted to believe it was real. Her mind reminded her of every cruel lie she had endured before. When she finally drifted to sleep, her dreams were filled with shadows and fire. She awoke to the sound of alarms. The ship shook violently, lights flashing red. She stumbled to her feet, chains clattering. The human was already at the controls, his face hard with focus. They found us, he said. Her stomach dropped. Who? Hunters. They want you back. Her blood turned to ice. Of course. She was never meant to be free. No one escaped the chains for long. The man pulled a weapon from the wall, checking the charge. His movements were quick but steady, like someone who had lived through battles before. He glanced at her, his voice firm. Stay behind me, no matter what. She stared at him, fear choking her throat. Why fight for me? I am nothing, just a slave. He looked at her with fire in his eyes. You are not property, not anymore. The words struck her deeper than she expected. She wanted to believe them. She wanted to hold them close, but hope was still dangerous. Outside, the enemy ships grew closer, shadows of hunters waiting to reclaim her. The girl's hands shook as she gripped her chains. She did not know if she was walking into freedom or into more pain. But one thing was certain, the human was willing to risk everything, for her, and that was something no master had ever done. The alarm lights bathed the ship in red, flashing like a heartbeat of danger. The girl gripped the wall for balance as the ship trembled again, caught in the pull of enemy scanners. The human's hands moved fast over the controls. His jaw was set, his eyes sharp. He did not look frightened, only focused. The girl's heart pounded. They found me. They came for me. She had known it was only a matter of time. Slavers never gave up their property, especially not one like her. She was not just another slave. She carried blood that was rare, blood they believed had value. Now they wanted her back. On the radar, 3 ships glowed bright, closing in fast. The girl pressed against the wall, her chains rattling. Her voice shook. You should let me go. Give me back to them. If you don't, they will kill you. The human glanced at her briefly, and in his eyes there was no hesitation. I will not give you to them. Her chest tightened. Why? You owe me nothing. I don't need a reason, he said, gripping the ship's controls. You are not theirs. Not anymore. His certainty frightened her more than the hunters did. No one had ever spoken about her like that before. The ship rocked as enemy fire grazed their hull. Sparks flew from the ceiling. The human cursed under his breath, steering sharply to the left. They want to disable us, not destroy us, he muttered. They want you alive." The girl's stomach turned. Of course they did. Alive, she was valuable. Dead, she was nothing. The human jumped to his feet, grabbing a rifle from the wall. He checked the charge, then tossed a small blaster toward her. She stared at it, frozen. I don't fight." "You will," he said firmly. "If they board, you shoot. You don't think, you don't hesitate. You survive." Her hands trembled as she held the weapon. It was heavy, cold. She had never fired one before. She had only known chains, not guns. The ship shuddered again as a hunter vessel latched onto their hull. The sound of claws digging into metal echoed through the cabin. "They're boarding," the human said. His voice was calm, but his body moved with speed. He took position by the door, rifle ready. The girl's throat went dry. Fear swallowed her whole. Then the door burst open with a hiss, and shadows poured in. Alien hunters, tall and armored, their eyes glowing with hunger. The human fired first. His shots were precise, clean, every blast striking true. The hunters staggered, some falling, others pressing forward. The girl pressed herself against the wall, clutching the blaster, but unable to lift it. Her chains rattled violently as she shook. One of the hunters spotted her. He grinned, sharp teeth glinting. "There you are, little prize." He lunged. The girl screamed, raising the blaster without thinking. She fired. The shot hit him in the chest, sending him crashing to the ground. Her breath came fast, wild, her hands trembling so hard she almost dropped the weapon. The human spared her a glance, eyes steady. "Good. Again if you must." She swallowed hard, nodding, though fear clawed at her throat. The fight raged. The hunters were strong, but the human was stronger. He moved like a storm, his rifle singing with fire. For every step they gained, he pushed them back. Still, there were too many. One struck him across the shoulder, and he stumbled, blood staining his coat. "Human!" the girl cried. "I'm fine!" he shouted, blasting the attacker back. But she saw the wound. It was not small. More hunters swarmed in, forcing them into the narrow corridor. The girl fired wildly, missing some shots, hitting others. Her fear was still strong, but now something else burned inside her. Desperation. She would not go back. Not again. The human slammed the door controls, locking the inner chamber. For a brief moment, silence fell, broken only by their ragged breathing. The girl looked at him, her chest heaving. "They won't stop. They'll keep coming. You'll die for me." He wiped blood from his arm, his jaw tight. "Then I die, but I will not let them take you." Her vision blurred with tears she did not want to shed. No master, no owner, no savior had ever spoken such words. He leaned against the wall, reloading his rifle. His voice softened. "Listen, I told you before. I failed once. I won't fail again. You deserve more than chains. You deserve a chance." Her chains rattled as she clutched them tightly. The metal cut into her palms, but she didn't care. The sound of claws returned. The hunters were cutting through the sealed door. Time was running out. The human steadied his weapon, his eyes locked on the door. "Stay behind me. Whatever happens, don't give up." The girl looked at him, her heart torn between fear and something she could not name. Outside, the hunters roared as the metal door began to break. Sparks flew. The girl gripped her blaster tighter, her chains heavy, but her resolve growing. For the first time in her life, she wasn't only waiting for pain, she was ready to fight, for him and for herself. The door burst open. The hunt had truly begun. The door exploded inward in a storm of sparks and smoke. Hunters poured into the narrow corridor, their armor glinting under the flashing red lights. Their roars shook the ship, filling the air with the sound of death. The human raised his rifle and fired. Blasts of light tore through the darkness, striking the first attackers down. His movements were fast, sharp, every shot clean. He fought like a man who had nothing left to lose. The girl pressed against the wall, her blaster clutched tight in her trembling hands. Fear gripped her chest, but she forced herself to lift the weapon. Her first shot went wide, her second struck true, hitting a hunter in the shoulder. The alien howled, stumbling back. Her chains rattled as she moved, every sound reminding her she was still bound, still half a prisoner. But inside, something had changed. She was not just hiding anymore, she was fighting. The corridor shook as the hunters pushed forward. They were too many. The human fought with fury, but the tide kept coming. One hunter swung a massive blade, catching the man's arm. Blood sprayed across the floor. He grunted, staggering, but he did not stop. He slammed his rifle into the attacker's face, firing point blank. "Human," the girl cried, her heart freezing at the sight of his wound. "I'm fine," he shouted back, though his sleeve was soaked in red. But she saw the truth. He was slowing, his movements less sharp, his breath ragged. The hunters noticed too. They pressed harder, their grins cruel. The girl screamed and fired again, hitting another in the chest. She had never felt power like this before, terrifying, yet fierce. For every step they took toward her, she fought back. Not well, not with skill, but with desperation. Still, the hunters were winning. The human stumbled, blood dripping from his side now. Another strike had cut through his coat, deep and brutal. He dropped to one knee, teeth clenched against the pain. "No!" the girl screamed, firing wildly at the attackers closing in on him. She hit one, missed another, then hit again. Her chains dragged at her wrists, heavy and cruel, but she refused to stop. The human forced himself up, staggering but still firing. His eyes burned with defiance. "I told you, they won't take you." But the hunters were not only after him. Two broke through the fire and lunged toward her. Their claws caught her chains, yanking her forward. She fell hard, the breath ripped from her chest. "No!" she cried, struggling, kicking, firing. But one hunter slapped the blaster from her hands, sending it skidding across the floor. The human roared, charging toward her, but another hunter tackled him, slamming him against the wall. His rifle clattered to the ground. Blood poured from his wounds, but still he fought, his fists striking, his teeth gritted. He looked less like a man and more like a storm refusing to die. "Run," he shouted to her, but she could not. The chains held her fast, and the hunter's grip was unbreakable. Her heart broke at the sight of him, bleeding, struggling, yet still fighting for her. The hunters dragged her back, their laughter cruel. "She belongs to us," one snarled. "You cannot save her, human." The human spat blood, his voice a growl. "She is not yours." He surged forward, slamming his fist into the alien's face. Bone cracked, blood sprayed, but for every enemy he struck, two more held him down. The girl screamed, reaching for him, but the hunters pulled her farther away. Her chains cut into her skin, her wrists bleeding. "Let him go," she cried, her voice raw. The hunters ignored her, dragging her toward the boarding hatch. Behind her, the human collapsed to one knee, his blood staining the floor. Their eyes met in that final moment. His face was pale, his breath heavy, but his eyes still burned with fire. "Fight," he mouthed silently. Her tears blurred her vision. She wanted to run to him, to pull him up, to stay. But the hunters were stronger. They hauled her through the hatch, back into their ship. The door slammed shut behind them. The girl's screams echoed through the cold metal halls as the hunters shoved her into new chains, tighter and heavier than before. She thrashed, but it was useless. Her heart was shattered. She had thought for the briefest moment that she could be free. She had begun to believe his words. And now, she was a slave again. But one thing burned brighter than her despair. The human had not stopped fighting, even as his blood stained the floor. He had risked everything for her, and she knew, if he was alive, he would come for her. The hunters mocked her, laughing as they bound her tighter. "Your protector bleeds on the floor. You are ours again. No one will save you." The girl lowered her head, her tears falling to the chains, but deep inside, a spark still burned. He will come, he promised. And promises, she realized, were stronger than chains. The slave market was alive again. Lights glowed, voices shouted, and the stench of greed filled the air. At the center stood the girl, chained heavier than before, her wrists bruised, her body trembling. The hunters had dragged her back here like a prize, mocking her with every step. Now, she stood on the platform once more, displayed like an object for sale. The announcer sneered, his voice booming across the hall. "Lot number 47 returns, escaped once but caught again. Stronger chains now. Who will bid for the runaway?" The crowd laughed. They jeered, pointing at her as though she were nothing but a joke. The girl kept her head low, her hair covering her face. Her heart was broken. She had begun to believe in freedom, begun to believe in him. But now, here she was, chained again, worthless again. And worst of all, she believed he was dead. She had seen him fall, bleeding, surrounded by hunters. No one could have survived that. The announcer shouted again, "Start the bidding at 200 credits. Hands rose. Voices shouted numbers. The price climbed quickly. Suddenly, she was valuable again. Not for who she was, but for the danger she had caused. The girl closed her eyes. "This is my life. Chains. Always chains." And then, she heard it. A voice calm but firm, cutting through the noise. 10. The sea. Raud went silent. Slowly, heads turned toward the back. Her breath caught. Her eyes flew open. It was him. The human stood there, blood still staining his torn coat, his body bruised and weak. But his eyes were alive, burning with fire. The crowd erupted in laughter. The human again! Didn't he almost die? He wants the slave back for scraps of credits. But the announcer frowned, nervous now. He slammed his staff. Sold again for 10 credits. The girl's chains rattled as the guards dragged her forward. She could hardly breathe. He was alive. He had come. When he reached her, he did not look at the crowd. He looked only at her. His voice was quiet but steady. I told you, I wouldn't let them take you. Her eyes filled with tears, hot and unstoppable. She whispered, broken, why? Why do this for me? He stepped close, his hands moving to her chains. With one sharp motion, he tore them free. The crowd gasped. Guards reached for weapons, but his glare froze them in place. Because no one owns you, he said, his voice ringing across the hall. Not anymore. The words struck her harder than any chain ever had. For a heartbeat, the hall was silent. Then the hunters roared, rushing forward to reclaim their prize. The human pulled her behind him, his rifle blazing. The crowd scattered as fire erupted in the market. Guards fell, hunters screamed, chaos spread like wildfire. The girl clung to his coat, her chains falling from her wrists, her heart pounding with fear and something else, something fierce and alive. Together they fought through the madness. He fired with deadly precision, and when enemies drew too close, she picked up a fallen weapon and fought beside him. They were no longer master and slave. They were a team. Step by step, they forced their way to the landing dock. The human staggered from his wounds, but still he pushed forward, never letting go of her hand. Finally, they reached his battered ship. He dragged himself into the cockpit, bleeding but defiant. She helped him, her own body trembling with exhaustion. The engines roared to life, lifting them into the night sky. As the market shrank behind them, the girl sat beside him, staring at the man who had risked everything. Her wrists were raw, her heart heavy, but for the first time she felt something new. Hope. The human leaned back, his breath ragged, his face pale. You're free now, he whispered. Her lips trembled. She reached for his hand, gripping it tightly. No, she said softly. We are free. His tired eyes turned to her, and in them she saw not pity, not ownership, but something deeper. Love. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered the words she had carried in her heart since the day he bought her. I expected pain, but you gave me love. The ship soared into the stars, leaving the chains behind forever. And for the first time in her life, she believed she was not just alive, she was free.